afternoon. Welcome to the Women in Business panel. Today's discussion is brought to you by Roosevelt's Women in Business Club and the Women's Leadership Council. I'm Deborah Orr, Associate Professor of Organizational Leadership and Development at Roosevelt. I'm also the faculty advisor for the student-led club, Women in Business. In celebration of Women's History Month, we wanted to highlight some of the incredible women leaders right here in the Roosevelt community. Now, I'd like to welcome and introduce our moderator, Maria Rivera. Maria is an honors finance student and president of the Women in Business Club. She has also received one of 9 scholarships as part of the inaugural class of the Joan Deutsch Herzog Women Leaders Scholarship. Additionally, Maria is completing an internship at the National Futures Association this spring semester. Maria, thank you for moderating today's discussion.
Thank you, Deb. It's a pleasure to lead this important conversation for our student body, alumni, and other guests. As an emerging finance professional, I'm always looking to learn and gain inspiration from other successful women leaders. With the exceptional guests joining us today, I know everyone will walk away with valuable insights they can apply to their professional and personal lives. With that being said, I'll turn to welcome our guests. First, I'd like to introduce Vicki Fuller. Throughout her highly successful career in financial services, Vicki has served in several leadership positions, including as a corporate board member for Fidelity Investments, Gusto, Equity Alliance LLC, and Ariel Alternative LLC, to name a few. She served as Chief Investment Officer of the New York State Common Retirement Fund and senior management positions for Alliance Bernstein and in earlier roles at Standard & Poor's and Morgan Stanley. Vicki has been named one of the most powerful African Americans on Wall Street and most powerful Black women in business by Black Enterprise magazines. She also received the Financial Women's Association Woman of the Year Award, among many other notable accolades. Last and certainly not least, Vicki is a Roosevelt trustee, a member of the Women Leadership Council Advisory Board, a proud alumna, and my mentor. Vicki, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Terry Brex, another exceptional RU alumna. Terry is the founder of Teacher Care, a nationwide agency that provides world-class private education and childcare for families and women tech founders, a leading voice on female entrepreneurs in the tech startup ecosystem. Terry has been recognized as a Forbes Woman, WGN's MVP, the Tribune's Most Remarkable Woman, the Herald's Influential Woman in Business, and featured in Crain's, the New York Times, Entrepreneur Magazine, and Forbes, among others. She is a speaker on diversity, community building, and tech startups, and recently joined the Women Leadership Council Advisory Board. Vicki and Terry, I appreciate you both being here today to share your experience as women leaders in business. With that being said, let's dive into the discussion. So today I will be asking a couple questions, and one of the first questions that we have is, what can young professionals do when they enter the workforce to positively influence their careers?
Vicki,
should I start? Okay. Well, again, I'm really glad to be here with all of you today that are in the audience. When I think about this question, my answer is about having a point of view or a plan before you enter the workforce. So one of the things that I tell young students all the time is this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And you should take the opportunity while you're in school to build your muscle. What do I mean by that? Develop relationships with the student body and your faculty. Get to know different people from different walks of life. Expand experiential education. Maybe take a Toastmasters speaking class. And one of the things that I had to learn to do was get out of my comfort zone. When I was in college, I was a commuter to Roosevelt. So I left my house and took the bus to Roosevelt, but Roosevelt was a world away in terms of the voices I heard, the countries that people came from. And I was mighty curious about what led these people to come to Roosevelt. What had their life's journey been up until then? I also tell people, be curious. Be curious about what's around you. Network for two reasons. One, because I think it expands your perspective, but I also think it gets you used to or comfortable with just interacting with people. A couple other things I would add, and this doesn't have to be a once in a lifetime thing, but it's not too early to start creating a plan for your life. What is it that you want to accomplish? What do you bring that no one else brings? And if you get to the point where you're looking at the workforce, think of, again, yourself as an asset. Ask questions about the companies that you are interviewing. Make sure that their values align with yours. Does your personality fit what the success factors are at the organization? And do everything you can to build your confidence model. Because the bottom line is you're an asset. You're very smart folks. And organizations that align with your values should be lucky to have you. And I think you need to walk into the rooms of those discussions in that manner.
Thank you, Vicki. That's some great advice. Networking, making sure we create a plan. Thank you. Terry, would you like to add something?
Absolutely. And Vicki, I can tell we have very like minds about all this. I think those were great words of wisdom.
Thank you.
I had two women that I wanted to quote here, given it's Women's History Month and what we're talking about, and directly for the answer to this question. So the great Madeleine Albright passed away, this week of cancer. And I found a quote that I thought was very helpful on this answer. And she said, whatever the job that you're asked to do at whatever level, do a good job because your reputation is your resume. And I grew up with that mantra from my mom, who worked in a factory at nights and did laundry during the day. And she always preached, you do your best, whatever it is, and you take pride in that. The other amazing woman that I'm very excited to quote is Judge Ketanji Brown at Jackson. And she says, be open to new ideas and experiences, because you'll never know when someone else will have an interesting thought or when a new door will open and take you on a journey of your dreams. And so I love the way she put that, and that is so on the mark. My personal thoughts about this, in addition, is use it to learn, to connect, and to open your horizons. I think it was pretty much echoed in those quotes, but having this mindset that you want to give it your all, having the mindset that you want to learn and develop your creativity, it's all about that. There's some people that come in and they're toxic, they're doing a job to do a job. But when you do a job and you're looking for how you can grow and how you can meet other people and how you can see down the road that it's going to help you, and having that kind of a mindset is huge, and being open to trying new things and being willing to fail in order to fail forward and to move ahead, I think are really, really important for everyone to know when they're starting that new job, because it's so scary. But yes, I think they're huge things. And I mimic the network as well. This is your first opportunity to get into a professional network, and use it wisely.
Thank you, Terry. Those were amazing quotes, and I must agree, right? Every time we must showcase we must be able to showcase our full authentic self when we come to the workforce, but also give a hard, be able to do the job well and be able to accomplish it to meet not only your expectations, but also others' expectations. Throughout my career in academia, I've realized that networking has helped me a lot. And I think it's very important for those watching who are students. It's not too late to start your network. Start it off early, right? Once you go into your freshman year of college, it's important to realize what kind of assets you bring to the table, create that plan, and network through and know what you want. So thank you both for the amazing response. I'm going to go on to our next question. So often emerging professionals like myself struggle with confidence and imposter syndrome. Did you experience those challenges? And can you share a moment or some strategies that helped you overcome it and boost your confidence?
I'll start.
Would you like
I definitely experienced that, particularly when I went to New York to work for Morgan Stanley. And so while I had an undergraduate degree from Roosevelt University, I had passed the CPA exam. I had an MBA from University of Chicago. My background was different. Things that some of my classmates talked about, whether it was squash or skiing or the places in the world that they had been to, those were things that were for my future. I hadn't experienced any of those things because I had come from a very poor family. And so just going to school was sort of showcasing something, an important achievement. And because I was uncomfortable, I said to myself, okay, you're either going to be uncomfortable and withdraw, and all the ambition you have for your career will go to the wayside, or you're going to have to overcome that. You're going to have to build that confidence muscle. And I ended up putting myself in situations where I would walk into rooms and introduce myself. I'd be scared to death. And hopefully they didn't see my hand shaking as I was talking, but it was because I needed to step out. And then the most important thing I had to learn to own is, how could I be an imposter? I'm real. The things that I have accomplished up to this point are real. They're manifest. And my background, while it might not be his or hers, it's rich with history and perspective. And what I have found in my career is my perspective. As a poor kid from outside Cabrini Green who thought she was going to major in philosophy, and her mother talked her out of it because she wouldn't make any money, I had significant worth, and perspectives I brought to the discussions were very helpful. I took public speaking because I was nervous, and I actually learned to, practice breathing techniques that would, make sure my voice didn't go to that high pitch when I was talking. And so I basically set out embellishing, taking the positives that I had, and then embellishing that with more muscle and more confidence. And the other thing I tended to do was raise my hand to do things that were going to challenge me. That if, and yes, if I did them poorly, I would fail. But if I was successful, I would be additive to the profits of the company where I was. And that worked. And finally, as I said earlier, this is a marathon. It's not, it doesn't happen overnight. And so when I had my setbacks, or the things that I would go home at night and say, God, I wish I hadn't done that like that, I had to be my best psychologist and say, you know what, that was yesterday. Okay, tomorrow's a new day. But continuing to tell myself what my mother used to tell me: you have tremendous value and worth, and all they need to do is see it.
Wow. Amazing. Terry, would you like to add anything?
Yes, absolutely. I don't, honestly, I've been in this really remarkable network of women who have achieved incredible things. I don't know one person who hasn't faced imposter syndrome. And sometimes it absolutely shocks me. because I would assume there is no way this person could possibly have imposter syndrome. And then, peel back the layers, and there you find it. And so it has been very shocking. One of the reasons that I do what I do is because I'm very mission driven. And I believe that the mission helps me when I'm afraid. And when you're afraid to take that step forward, but you know that you're helping other people, it gives you that superpower. That's the little Shiro that happens. So I grew up with my own challenges. I was given up for adoption, and I had a very abusive father that adopted me, and he was very clearly saying that you will amount to nothing, basically. And so I had that drummed in my head, but I knew like there's that inner voice. And I had also, I had a mom who had been a concentration camp survivor, and I watched what she did, the life she led, how she figured things out. And I knew there's something there. I would be able to get out of this because I was strong enough to do that. And that has taken me really far in being able to know whatever happens, that I can rely on figuring it out, because she had nothing when she came to this country, literally nothing. And she'd been through these horrific situations. But if the roof needed tiling, she would figure out how to climb up 2 stories and tile that roof. And when the toilet needed fixing, she was on it. And when the bread needed baking, she was on that too. So, it was a really great example to see you can figure things out and you can do it. So my advice is really like when your goals are sometimes so big and your vision is large, break it down into the smallest little pieces. And for me, some days when I started this all out, I did not feel comfortable going to the city. And I would get lost, and I'd trying to get to the parking garage. I'd wind up getting lost, and then trying to get, and that itself was an achievement for me, that I would be able to find the parking garage and get to where I was going on time, and be like, okay, you did that now, now the next goal. But, breaking it into these little pieces was very, very helpful. And I see, as I've gone through all of this, there are so many people who have challenges, and so many women in particular, that they just don't see the light that they have inside of them, and they're holding it back. And if they can just let it go and get out of their own way, like they shine and they make the world so much better. They create profits and companies. There is just so much that the world needs right now, especially, well, always, but let yourself go there. So.
Yes, sometimes I feel like having a big vision is, it's good to have, but also so fearing. I know, like, sometimes in some of my class projects, I say like, oh yeah, I want to be a millionaire, I want to do this. And then we have to break those things down on how are we going to accomplish to do these things. And accomplishing one of those little goals to get to your big goal is so fulfilling. And I'm glad we're able to talk about these things of how we go through imposter syndrome. Our little head and our voice could be a helpful thing or a bad thing, but it's always good to be able to control those thoughts in our head. So thank you both for the great advice.
Absolutely. I'm going to add one more thing. One of the things that we do at Women Tech Founders is we have a lot of role models, different kinds of role models coming, in every way. There is diversity there, because it's important to find the person that you can relate to. And regardless of what your problem or your goals are, it's so helpful to see someone that looks like you and to learn from them.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to go on to our next question. What is the biggest factor that has helped you become a successful women leader? Terry, would you like to
start? I would say it is because I really appreciate the people that are around me and the opportunities that I have. I think having a positive outlook on life is definitely a helpful thing to go and move forward. Again, having those role models and hearing those stories to stay inspired all the time keeps you moving forward, and also learning from them the techniques and the challenges and how they overcame them. That's really important. Like I'm a major, like, listen to every podcast. I'm on YouTube. I'm every book I can find. Like, I love learning, and I love learning from people who have trailblazed in particular. And so I've had the good fortune to turn that into an organization, and that's kind of what we do at Women Tech Founders.
So what I would say is, for me, and I didn't think about it at the time, but when I decided to move to New York, which was definitely out of my comfort zone, because I had been, to undergrad and graduate school in Chicago. When I took a position in New York, I was going to a place where I had no relatives. The only friends I had were the colleagues or fellow folks from the University of Chicago, and I was on Wall Street. And the experience of moving to New York, and the year I moved to New York, the summer, there was a garbage strike. If you've been in New York, they don't have alleys. And New York had also, just a few years prior to me arriving, almost gone bankrupt. So the city, there was homelessness, there were some scary times. And I had also given up a really, nice apartment in Hyde Park, and I was living in a studio. So I said to myself, okay, and I'll be honest, I was like boohooing a little bit once all my relatives were gone. And I said, well, you're here now, you can't go back. And that willingness to take the road less traveled served me in other things, because I ended up going into business initiatives where, again, if I was successful, I'd get the accolades, and if I wasn't, I would likely be fired. And I think the other thing that helped is, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be a philosophy major, and the compromise with my mother was that, okay, you minor in philosophy, so you can have the big picture thinking and ask all of the big world questions, but major in business. And I think having the curiosity about what makes things tick, what makes companies successful, what makes countries successful, economic cycles, all of that served me well. And then the thing that really knocked me on my butt, in a way, I'm jumping to your next question, was I didn't have a good experience at my first position in New York. And so I had to learn to make, lemonade with my lemons. And that sort of muscle that I keep referring to helped me a lot. The other thing that I've always done, I've always been a planner. So I would have these notes on the mirror, sort of my 1 year plan, my 5 year plan, my 10 year plan. Most of the things that I had on those plans, they didn't pan out. But what did happen is that other opportunities came about, because I was always looking over the mountain for, sort of what was the next opportunity that would help me actualize as a successful person.
Well, you know what? All of a sudden, I can't. Your mute's on there. But
okay, sorry, we got a little virtual. Okay.
So, as far as the
since we went a little bit into our next.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Maria.
Okay. Okay. I was just going to ask our next question, and it's what is one of your most significant barriers that you've had in your career, and have you been confronted with any gender-related roadblocks?
So I would say, for the barriers, the biggest barrier that I have found is within myself. It's when I say, I want to do that, but no, I'll do it later. And I let that kind of fear stop me from doing what I need to do. Because in the end, I know that when I look back, the thing that I'm going to regret is what I didn't do, not what I did. And I really believe that. So yes, I totally believe it's me is my biggest barrier. As far as gender type of barriers, when I took my company and turned it into a tech platform and went looking for funding and got into the investment, trying to fundraise, very, very male dominated space where there was and this is, we're talking like almost a decade now. So Vicki, I have a feeling that you are very aware of what that could have looked like, but roughly 30% of all tech startups at that point were led by women, and virtually no venture capitalists, or you just didn't see any investors that were understanding the kinds of problems that many women were trying to solve, and that included mine. And so that led me to finally searching out that 3%, and we wound up coming together. And what I saw is these women's businesses that were profitable, that were socially impactful. They were running into problems that were just ridiculous. I mean, problems like investors making moves on women who were trying to get investment dollars instead of listening what they had to say, and leaving with the answer of, let me talk to my wife about this issue before I take it any further. Or I mean, just real nonsense. And out in the environment at that time, it was just as sexist. The Chicago tech community at that time was advertising tech conferences with posters of women with bunny ears. I mean, it was crazy. So our organization started up as Women Tech Founders, but the acronym WTF was what really took the company off, and people got it, they understood, and it started discussions, and it started the change. And so today, Chicago and all across the country is doing so much better. And still, roughly 30% of all tech startups are led by women, which isn't enough, but it's a far cry from where it was. But yet the investment dollars are 2.7%. And for women of color, it's like 2%. I think it's 3.25 for Asian women and 1.5 for Black and Latinx.
So I've experienced both gender discrimination and racial discrimination. And I mentioned earlier that I always wanted to seek out the path less traveled. And part of that was strategy, that I couldn't assume on Wall Street that I could just be a portfolio manager and money would be raised and I would get to manage it. So I learned how to expand the business of the organization, raise capital that I would then manage, so that there wouldn't be a question about my bottom line. And I would fight for my bottom line, because even in some of those days, even knowing what your income statement looked like, the revenues that you had brought in and your performance wasn't enough. You had to fight to be able to get that, allocation of return in terms of compensation from people who didn't necessarily want to give it to you because they didn't expect you to fight. I think the other thing that I learned, there was no role models. I mean, I was on Wall Street in the 80s, early 80s. Everybody knew who I was, even if they had never met me, because they knew there was one black woman in investment banking, and that was me. But my perspective is every life brings a challenge. There is something, there's something that's going to be the challenge, or the thing that if it weren't for this, I might be successful. And I think the strategy of life is figuring out how to take your, the portfolio you hold and make a winner out of it. So I don't gripe about the discrimination. I'm a force for change. I will advocate for diversity of thought and gender and race and sexuality, but I don't take it on my shoulder, because that doesn't help me be a successful human being.
Thank you, Vicky and Terry. Those were some stories, right? Like Vicky being the first one of the Black women on Wall Street must have been really hard, especially back then in the 80s. Like, I wasn't even born during that time, but I could only imagine.
I'm dating myself.
But I could only imagine. And it's so inspiring to see and hear these stories, right? Vicky, as my mentor, we've had the opportunity to create a relationship and talk a little bit about the experiences she has gone through, and myself as well. So I'm happy that we're here sharing both yours and Terry's experience with the rest of the guests, the audience. So I know Terry mentioned a little bit about how in venture capital, you struggled, right, getting funding for your tech startup. And oftentimes in the boardroom, they're still male dominated. What can us women do to make sure we're bringing more women into the boardroom?
Vicky, I'll let you go.
Okay, all right. It's one of the things I will tell you that I'm thrilled about in terms of your age, without sort of dating what my age is that when I am interviewing or have been interviewing young candidates, they're asking the questions before they join the organization about what kind of organization that is. Can I have work-life balance? What is the diversity at the board level, at the C-suite? How do diverse candidates make it up the career ladder? And especially in the aftermath of the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, that companies are finally starting to get that this is not an episode that's just going to go away, because I've heard on some of the boards I sit of candidates who will say, why should I join your organization? You're very homogeneous. There's no diversity. What are the opportunities for myself? And there is a tremendous war for talent now. And what I'm finding is even the companies who really would rather just keep things the way they used to be, know that it's not going to be possible, because ultimately, if you can't attract the talent, if you're not acting as a good steward, not just for your shareholders, but for your employees and the community, and likewise, you're not going to be a good performer. And I think that is starting to gel. So my advice is, it starts with you asking the questions and voting with your feet in terms of the companies that you join. Do they represent your values? And if they don't, make sure that they know that they didn't get you because you want a diverse organization. You'd be surprised how that kind of information, permeates throughout an organization.
And taking it from there, just as Vicky was alluding to, knowing your value is huge. When you can walk in a company and you can not only be who you are, but articulate why that person you are is going to add value to the company, your unique perspective, your goal, your commitment to different values and so forth. Those are all important pieces. And then when you can stand together and raise the voices of others when you're in that room and something comes up that needs to be addressed, instead of standing back and letting that other person try to fight that battle to get behind them, it can make a huge difference in actually changing the cultures and opening the mindset of people.
Yes, I think, right, like Vicky mentioned, this whole George Floyd thing kind of brought a light to corporations and other employers that there needs to be more diverse in different levels. And I'm so happy that I am going into the workforce now with companies looking for diverse talent. Like, not only am I checking these boxes, but I also know the value I bring because of my background. So thank you, Terry and Vicky, for sharing that with us. So on to our next question. We talked a little bit about work-life balance. Do we really have a work-life balance, or is it just like a myth?
I'll start. I didn't do well in this category when I was younger, so I put up, and it was tough. I won't tell you any lies. I mean, there was an organization, I won't name them, that I was a professional at. That if a woman decided that she wanted to have children, they said she was on disability. So think about that mindset, right? And I was on Wall Street, right? At a time where you were just chattel, right? You were expected to have, dark circles under your eyes. I think it's changing. I definitely think it's changing. I mean, there was a couple of years ago, I think the previous chairman and CEO of Goldman Sachs said that they were no longer encouraging their associates to work, 18-hour days. But the reason they're changing is because of what's happening from the talent perspective. Many young people are not even taking the traditional path, right? They want to start a firm earlier, or they want to go into a business that has impact and sustainability. And when you have this war for talent and people have so many more options, they have to change. So I think I still don't think Wall Street is a 9 to 4 job, but it's not what it was. And I think organizations are starting to understand that if you're trying to create the leaders for the future that are going to lead and guide these organizations into their 50th or 100th year of existence, you have to have more than one muscle. It just can't be about the deal. It just can't be about making money. It has to be about having a more holistic perspective, something I call holistic success. So it's not utopia, but I've been in the business long enough to know that it is different. And I still get shocked when I'll hear, let's say we're in the midst of a deal and they say, oh, well, James or Mary, they're on vacation. I could never do that, right? I mean, you took vacation when there was nothing else to do, which is probably around Christmas time. So I think we're getting there. We got a lot of work to do, but I would say my advice to all of you is keep working for that, because we want to be enlightened beings, not just workaholics.
So I 98.5 agree with you, Vicky. But
Okay. I'll take that. I'll take that.
So the profit piece of it, I don't know. I want to believe, as a person who's like very mission driven, social impact is my life, all that kind of stuff. What I see going out there is that companies want to say they are, and they want to be that company that has the halo on it. But in the end, in the very bottom line, it's going to be about profit. And so in many ways, that gives all of us as consumers, as employees, which, as you said, a power, because we can vote with our pocketbooks. We can vote with, the information we're sharing about companies. We can vote with who we're going to be employed by. We do have that power. And again, that goes back to, I think that each of us needs to learn what is our value that we can bring to that company. And hopefully it has social impact, but it has social impact that will also help that company profit. Yeah. So, my stories, Vicky, are like your stories. I bet we could go out for some beers and have 1,000 of the stories. But when I found out I was pregnant, I was working at a computer company, a global computer company. And when I started showing, the regional manager brought me in, and literally I was on the top of my game, top of the class, top of the numbers, all that stuff. I was asked to leave because I would no longer be able to provide the value to the company that they were putting into me, literally almost word for word. And so, I mean, that's the state of what it was. Luckily, I did wind up leaving for a while, but my direct manager sent a limo to pick me up and bring me back, and apologized for the regional manager and stood up for him. So, you know, the male allies can make a huge difference. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I'll agree, we're not at the promised land.
Yes. Yes. But to your point about the better, my daughter now, she is pregnant, and the company, I mean, it's like a world of difference. I became an entrepreneur because I couldn't work for a corporation and have a family. I didn't feel like there was a way to do it that was fair to a child and fair to the company, given all the parameters. So I left, and, you know, build your own table, right? And so that's what I did. Now my daughter has a very different story. The company is extremely supportive, and it's amazing the differences that she's coming into, and probably that talent war has had a lot to do with it.
I think so.
Yes, it's amazing to see how companies are shifting right into being able to provide more of a work-life balance for their employees. I believe having a work-life balance would also help them excel better at their job because they're happy at home and at work. So thank you both for sharing. So before we go into questions from the audience, I would like to know, is there any final advice that you would give to the next generation of female leaders?
I'll let you start, Terry.
Okay, I wrote something for this answer. So I'll read it directly to you here. I got started, it's like, oh, there's so many things that you'll learn when you're as old as we are, you know, and so I tried to condense. So number one rule is write your own story, because someone will write it, and that person should be you. Number two, make your own rules and let them guide your life. Number three was be kind, both to yourself and to others, because nothing will take you further in your career or your life. And the last is, if you don't have a seat at the table, or if the table stands on 3 legs, build your own table. Create the world you want to see, and in the end, it will lead you to the success that really matters to you, because you're stronger than you know. You should stand in your own sun. The world needs your unique brilliance to shine.
We are so alike, Terry.
I know.
I've got 6 principles. I'll be quick. Be kind. Treat people like you want to be treated. You embrace your diversity as well as the diversity of other people. So enlarge your tent to bring in more than where you come from. Strive for holistic success, and that's success in life. It's not just, you know, the gig you have, the money you make, but are you trying to make this world a better place? Accept the reality you will be wrong. You will make mistakes. They're not fatal. And when you do have obstacles, you know, make lemonade with your lemons. You know, we all are, you know, there was a saying that I thought it was Michael Jordan said about, you know, the amount of times he would miss the basket before he got it. And say yes to stretch opportunities, the things that sort of can propel you, but that you're afraid about. So those are my 6.
Wow, great advice. I know I wrote down some notes while you guys were talking, so thank you. I'm going to move forward with our audience questions. They're coming in. So the first audience question that we have are there global efforts to engage women leaders in various industries, such as technology, education, medicine, etc., in Africa, Europe, Asia, Central and South America?
My experience is yes. Yeah, and they're organizations that are inclusive. You know, I've been to conferences in Asia and Africa and the like. So what's beautiful about this is that instead of us being silos and deciding that we will sort of be on our own solo journey, there's this whole network that's being sort of created to share what people have learned and what they've recovered from and what's coming around the bend. Yes, there are, and they're easy to find, and they're in every industry as far as I can tell.
Vicky, before we move on to Terry, sorry, do you have any advice for women who are working internationally? I know in like some of my classes, they spoke about how business is not conducted the same as in here in the US. So do you have any advice for us?
So while I've traveled extensively outside the US, I haven't ever been outside, sort of looking in. Um, what have I seen? In Europe, there's been a lot of achievement in terms of gender diversity. In Asia, I think it's still pretty difficult. Latin America is a mixed bag. I don't know if I'm answering the question that the person asking had, but I guess maybe to sum it up, things are getting better everywhere, but countries or geographies are starting from different places, based upon how embedded sort of the lack of diversity is within that part of the world. But in the old days, when I would be in Asia, I wouldn't really see, sort of people that Asian female portfolio managers, investment bankers. I see them now. Ditto for every place. So we still got a lot of work to do, because we forget that we're half the population or more, depending upon the country. And so the fact that we are treated, or maybe allow ourselves to be treated like minorities in places where we are the majority of the population and the majority of the breadwinning population, is something that we still have to do some work on.
Terry, would you like me to ask the question again? Or...
No, I think I've got it, and I will just say what we're doing at Women Tech Founders. One of the things that is important to us is that all women are represented, and that includes women around the world. And so we have had, we do different things to bring these women together and to showcase their stories and the work that they're doing. We've had women like Roya Mahoob from Afghanistan, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She has done work to help women in Afghanistan learn technology so that they could be of value in their home. And in that way, because women there were not allowed to leave their home to go out and were devalued, it changed the complete perspective about their worth, because now they're the main breadwinner. And suddenly they're important in the community. And then she would connect them with different businesses around the world. But she did a lot of other work with young girls and robotics and so forth. Now with what's going on, she had spoken at our conferences several times, but with what's going on right now, it's just really horrific. But we have had women from Argentina and women from Europe, women doing different work, all for the betterment of other women that have come into our organization and talked about ways that they're moving the needle.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next audience question. And they are asking if you could give us some guidance on how to manage negative feedback when women put other women down. Any tips on how to uplift each other?
Terry, you're gonna have to go first. I gotta think about this.
Maybe it goes back to us going and grabbing that beer again. Yeah.
Please invite me to this social.
What can I say?
It is really discouraging, obviously, when it is another woman who does this. I believe that there are different types of women. And I want to hang out with the really awesome women like Vicky and you, Maria, and, the women who want to make a change, who want to make the world a better place, who care about other people. It's like everybody else in the world, right? There's good people in every group. And then there's some that feel it's their duty in life to pull other people down. And it is your responsibility to stay away from those people who have nothing but negative aura and are trying to pull you down. You have to protect yourself. You have to take care of yourself. You have to find your people, like the people who you jive with. It took me, decades to find my people. But when I did, you feel it and it opens you up to be a better you. And you learn then that, the negativity and so forth, it needs to have its own barrier.
So I remember being asked, maybe it was a similar question, and maybe on a panel, and I said, well, believe it or not, it's not always been men who have been negative, and sometimes some of my biggest champions for me were men, and when a woman says something negative, I think we probably take it more to heart because it's like we're on the struggle together. I would just conclude that they're not there yet, right? They're unaware. Pray for them, and and keep it moving, right? That's part of that lemon and lemonade, right? Just not everybody's gonna be for you, Don't let it get you down.
Yeah, I must agree. Like, I feel like when us women like kind of, say something bad or something, we take it more to a personal level because it's other women judging us, right? So thank you both for sharing those experiences. So we do have another question. Do you feel being single attributes to a higher level of success versus being in a relationship? Do you have any advice on relationships such as time management, support, and having a healthy balance?
So I don't feel like there is one way to be successful. I think everybody has to define that for themselves, what success looks like. And I believe that you can make it work regardless of your relationship status. I have a gazillion people in my life, and I'm trying to balance it all the time. My family is super important to me. And I don't feel like it takes away from me, from my time, although there are definitely, I'm like that kind of person who always wants to kind of go to work, and every once in a while during a Christmas dinner or something, I'm running into a back room and I have to write down some notes on something. But all in all, for me, who I am, it has made me stronger to go back and take some of the steps sometimes that are harder or scarier. It gave me additional armor. It isn't always that way, obviously. And I don't feel like a person who doesn't make the same choice as I made or doesn't wind up in the same situation that I wound up is going to be any less successful.
I would agree with that, Terry. I don't think there's a one way of doing it. I think, if you're single because you don't want a partner right now, that's your choice. That's your personal decision. But I wouldn't hold off on having a full life for a career, because career is just part of what makes the person. For me, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't handle work-life balance that well, and I had regrets about it because, by the time I was comfortable being able to, start a family, Mother Nature had said next lifetime. And so, that was a sacrifice. And I don't know if I could do it all over again, would I make the same decision, right? But that was the decision I made. So I've become a great aunt to my nieces and nephews.
And that was actually my intention, is I was going to be single for a very long time until, maybe I was 40, something like that. And then I'd give it some consideration. That was the plan. Well, I got into college, and before I graduated college, I was pregnant and having a baby. So, life.
And it turned out okay.
Right? You roll, you just roll.
You just go on. You go with the flow.
Yep.
Okay, so just one last question. Vicky, who is your favorite philosopher? Do you have a favorite philosopher? You have to have a favorite one.
I actually don't. In fact, when I think about, well, actually, my favorite philosopher, and I think was my professor at Roosevelt University, my philosophy and logic professor. And now I've got to remember his name because actually I don't. What I find happens is many of the people that I really am drawn to are philosophers slash psychologists. Like I just read a book by Viktor Frankl. So he was a psychologist, right? But having spent time in a concentration camp, he had points of view on sort of the human spirit, and what humans can, how they can recover from the most disastrous of situations. So I think I tend to like people who have the mind, sort of both aspects. And now I've got to try to remember or find out from Roosevelt whatever happened to my professor of philosophy and logic.
Yes, we have to find out for you, Vicky.
Yeah.
Terry, we know you mentioned that you love to read books. Do you have a favorite book you would like to share?
So I can't believe Vicky was just talking about it, actually. It's one of my favorites. But before I'll start that one, there's actually like two, because I feel like I'm in this intersection of life all the time. So if you are a person who wants to start a business or be an entrepreneur or just be that person who comes up with new things, The Lean Startup is a really great book to make you think about how you're going to tackle big problems in a way that's actually achievable and breaking them down and making them real. And so, even without having a lot of finances, even without having a lot of time, it helps you walk through how to figure this kind of thing out. And that's by Steve Blank. The other one, Viktor Frankl, is The Meaning of Life. And yeah,
Isn't that funny?
Love that book. Yeah. Well, having my mom's story being so central in my life, that book definitely has great meaning to me. And I've shared that book with many people as well.
I knew I liked you, Terry.
Well, I'm glad you both are over here having a conversation and getting along and stuff. So I know we're getting close to time. So do you have any final words of wisdom for our watchers, for our viewers?
Have fun. Have fun. Enjoy the journey. Don't take it so seriously. That and that's some advice I've learned because I was very serious when I was younger. Life was very serious. I have learned to have fun and laugh at myself. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Terry, any words of wisdom? Final words?
I guess central is like create the world you want to see. I feel like Roosevelt University is known for social justice, and the kind of people that gravitate to it, I think, often have perspectives that are very unique and very important, and they can have a big voice in the world.
Yes. Well, thank you, Vicky and Terry. I enjoyed moderating this panel with you both.
Maria, Maria.
Here she is.
Leading this conversation for our community. Thank you for taking on the role, and I can't wait to see what you accomplish next. Vicky and Terry, we appreciate your time and sharing your leadership journey with us today. And our students and alumni have so much to learn from you and from your experiences and your achievements. And thank you so much for sharing so openly today. We really appreciate your time and what you've shared with us today. Is very generous of you. And to all of our guests here on campus and across the world, thank you for tuning in to this important discussion for Women's History Month. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.